Of college young men and women is in serious moral difficulty, this writer writes. Compared with generations preceding, they have shunned discipline and a willingness to excel in their studies. Many give little or no thought to the serious issues of life. Common decency and modesty and manners and dress apparently are things of the past. The fact that evil is called good while good is called evil, I'm bad. He didn't say that, but somebody else did. Seems to be of small concern to them. Student groups indulge in wild orgies of self-gratification, while co-eds dress and walk in a manner deliberately intended to arouse sexual desire. Both young men and women in their actions and conversations make sexual overtures in the most shameless fashion. Does that sound like a pretty fair description of kids today? That was written by a man called Aristophanes 500 years before Christ. Here's another one. Our youth today love luxury, this philosopher comments. They have bad manners, contempt for authority, and disrespect for older people. Children today are tyrants. They no longer rise when their elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before visitors, gobble their food, and tyrannize their teachers. That was written by Socrates, also in the 5th century before Christ. So let's put this down. Are kids worse today? No, they are not. They're just as bad. But they're not worse. Matter of fact, being a kid, and all of us have been kids at one time, means that you have problems that are common to all kids. And what we're going to look at in our first session together is what makes this particular generation of young people, by generation I mean 25-year span is basically a biblical generation. What makes this generation of the young different from any other kids in history? First of all, I have to give you the statement that parents use. This is the single statement most calculated to turn off a kid from their parents. All right? Every parent has used it. And here is the statement. When I was your age. And it's usually followed by I had to walk through the snow in my bare feet for 14 miles to get to school and pay the teachers to educate me, stuff like that. But anyway, here's something for you if you ever get to be a parent. That is not true. Parents, especially parents, we could say more particularly grandparents, never were the age of these kids. These are unique pressures. These are things that have never happened, we're going to give you this morning, have never happened to any generation of children in any time. The first one, and the one we want to focus on, is that this is the first generation growing up with total media exposure. That has just plain never happened before. When we say total media exposure, we mean that it is now possible, as a technological revolution, of course, it is now possible for young people to be put instantly in contact with any other place in the world, to see in living color that which is happening only a few seconds before on the other side of the world. With satellite linkage, in the old days, for instance, say there was a major war. You might hear about it by a runner who collapses in your door, having run for 6 months around the world. By that time, the war is probably over, but he's getting the news. A war has just broken out in Polypolesia or wherever. Now you can see that war. If a plane crashes in Thailand, boom, it's on the morning news. It's just there. And what we're looking at is not the content of what is being said, though that in itself we could ask a lot of questions on. I'm not saying what this media is saying to kids. We're looking at the media itself. And we are going to particularly focus on television, because television is a new medium. When you think about it, before 1950, there really was no television. So in the lifetime of many people on this ranch, television was invented and brought in. It's a brand new medium. We have not really paid a lot of attention until the last decade of the effects of television on kids. So what I want to do is show you what particular pressures young people are faced with because of television. Now, again, we're not talking about what television's saying. Everybody goes, there's a lot of demonic things on television. So give you bangy loop. There's a lot of bad stuff. I'm not talking about what's on television. I'm talking about the medium itself. We've got, when we look at TV, three very important techniques that have developed. First of all, television has taught kids to love and to live in the in-depth experience. They will call this, the way kids learn today, the primary way young people learn today, is not the way kids have learned for the last 300 or 400 years. The primary way kids learn today is not by books. Now, in the old days, see, Gutenberg, remember, he invented the printing press. Up to that, if you wanted a book, you had to handwrite it. So a bestseller was like 40 copies. When Gutenberg developed the printing press and the first Bibles were printed, made the Reformation possible, it really trained generation after generation on what we call print technology. And the way that you learn in print is simple. So you start at the top and you work down. Unless you're Hebrew and you work from this side. See that? I don't know, very many people go this way, but see, the Chinese, of course, they read up and down like that, see, which makes them much more godly. When they read the Bible, they're always going, yeah. And we're going, no way, no way. You know, anyway, this linear thinking actually affects communications theorists say that we have really two ways of processing data. They call it left brain, right brain activity. One side of your brain sort of deals more with the artistic, the inductive, the picture type stuff. The other side of your brain deals with maths and point 1, point 2, point 3 things. Now what has happened is that this reading stuff and learning stuff from books has highly developed us in that point 1, point 2, point 3 thing. But what it has not focused on until very recently is that other whole side of the brain. So what we're seeing now is a communications revolution that shifted away from the print kind of thinking to the other kind of thinking, which is picture thinking. Okay? Television has been a major contributor to this. Now let me show you some things. We'll give you some fun little things you can do yourself. What is this in-depth experience? We'll call it sampling. Television, you know, is really, can you write this word down? Remember this word? The word is inductive. As distinct from deductive. It's got nothing to do with Howard deduct. Thought I'd throw that in. What you're looking at when you're looking at a television picture, and I've got a little thing here if I can find it for you. See if I can find it. Let's see, it's not in there. It's probably not in here. Here it is. What you're looking at in television is a still picture or a shot that is changing 50 times a second. So within 1 second, you're watching 50 different changes. The average person sees 795,000 pictures a day, television. These are constantly shifting images. And what kind of image is a television picture? It is, the more exciting it is, the less boring bits are cut out. For instance, here is the way old television used to work. A person would get up and they would go, like Dragnet, for instance. We need to find out the answer to this. It's probably on the street. Okay, let's go to the street. Camera follows them. They go to the street. They go down they head out to the street. It reaches them down on the street, and they go, here we are on the street. Now, let's look. Now, today, what they do is they cut out all the boring stuff in between. So they go, perhaps it's in Afghanistan. And the next frame, they're in Afghanistan. What happened to all this stuff in between? They cut it out. The way kids learn today is like this. Snitches and snatches. It's sample. People get their news like that. See, it's not, television doesn't make for discussion. You understand that? Television makes for one-liners. You know, people sitting down having deep, detailed discussion, people leave during that. So it's all this one shot. You can really see this in commercials. And I'll show you how to analyze a commercial in a little while. But the more people have worked on this, the faster things have sped up. So what we got now is a hot commercial, say a 30-second Coke or a Pepsi commercial where they're going to spend $500,000 for 60 seconds or 30 seconds. You're going to compress into one picture a vast amount of constantly shifting stuff because you see, it is boring if you put all the bits in between. Basically, we've got a can of fizzy water. That has to be sold. Okay, so what you do is put all this exciting stuff. Here's what I want you to do. When you look at a commercial, don't look at the local one, but, come down, buy our Chevrolets. We got some great deals here. Not that one, not those commercials. Look at one of these hot, major commercials, and here's what I want you to do. Every time the picture changes on the screen, reset a clock. Here's the way you do it. Here's an audible clock. Look at your watch if you got one and go like this. 1 higgledy-piggledy, 2 higgledy-piggledy, 3 higgledy-piggledy, 4. That's about higgledy-piggledy, 1 higgledy-piggledy. It's about a second. You see that? See? 1 higgledy-piggledy, 2 higgledy-piggledy, right? The reason I'm giving you this is because it's really hard to look at a watch and look at the screen at the same time. So you can say this out aloud. 1 higgledy-piggledy. Every time you see a change on the screen, reset your audible clock. If everything stays up for 3 seconds, it'll be 1 higgledy-piggledy, 2 higgledy-piggledy, 3 higgledy. Oh, change, see? Okay, now here's what you find. All the boring commercials, there's one guy up there for 60 higgledy-piggledy, 70 higgledy-piggledy. That. The hot commercials, no image stays on that screen for more than a second. You'll see one, like that. And they think that by the 1990s, which have already arrived, we will have blipverts, which is all of the data in a 30-second or a 60-second commercial compressed into, say, 9 seconds. You'll just get it like that. And here's what's wild. The people who watch those will be able to see every image in those commercials. I'll show you the difference between one generation and another. Take a wise, articulate, talented, dexterous adult and take a 9-year-old boy and give them both a video game that neither have seen before. And you tell me who will beat the cheese out of the other one in about 15 minutes max. Why is that? Because kids actually see more on screens visually than their parents do. There have been tests, for instance. You ever see the Brady Bunch? I'm not talking about the content of the show. Who cares if you ever see the content of the show? But the opening of it has the screen divided up into a whole bunch of frames, okay? And there's a different person in each frame. Well, they did this some years ago. These are for very small people, these bottom ones. They did is they had different images in each one of these frames, each one talking, or doing something, smiling or something. And they had a large version of this, say with about 30 different images on the screen, and they gave adults and children 60 seconds to look at the screen with all these images, and then to write down what they could remember. Well, in set things, like in memory tests, where there is a fixed picture or fixed objects, adults do pretty well. And let's say there were 30. I don't know, I've forgotten what the number they had. Say they had 30 items there, 60 seconds to look at it, and then you had to write down what you could remember. Adults did pretty well. They got 12, sometimes 15. Kids got 24, 28, stuff like that. There really is a difference. They are visually more sophisticated than any other generation that has ever lived. Now write that down and think about it. Kids are visually more sophisticated than any generation of young people who have ever lived, which means they see more, they think more in pictures, and their whole life is very sophisticated visually. That's why they're so conscious of things like fashion and movement and stuff like that. They are very, very fast. That's why the Army and the military are using video games to train kids for real fighters. You play Top Gun on a video game, it's only a brief step from there to play Top Gun on a real Top Gun. And they're finding kids, this is the premise of The Last Starfighter, who are so fast in their hand-eye coordination that what they're going to do is put the real weaponry set up just like a video game. So you sit in your little thing with the moving, got one, got 15, and you're getting real 15. The new helmets that look like Darth Vader have all of the data, and just by turning and by looking, you do this, and it gives you a side picture immediately in the front. You do this, and it gives you the picture behind. You blink your eyes, and it sets you a thing. You cough, so you better not sneeze, and they steals. All right? Now, I give you this to explain something. Here is a pastor, we'll call him Pastor Disaster for short, who is a good man. He has prayed and fasted and he loves God, but he has not understood this major shift that has taken place. So what he is going to do, however, is before the adult message, he is going to give his 20, 30-minute Sunday school talk to the children. So he said, all right, this morning, children, we're going to have our Sunday school talk. So he's sitting in front of them, the most visually sophisticated 8- and 9-year-olds that have ever lived. Okay? Now, the pastor doesn't understand what's happening here, but he's going to get up, and what he's going to do is he's going to, first of all, he is going to tell the story he's going to tell. Remember, these kids have watched thousands of stories. They've watched in comics, they've watched them in cartoons, they've watched, and they know a lot about stories. So the pastor begins, he gets about 2.5 minutes into his message, and the kids are looking at each other like, oh yeah, I know, that's right, yeah. They've probably figured out what this story is 2.3 minutes into the message. Well, pastor grinds on, he finishes it, see? Okay, kids all look at each other. Then he explains it. It gets worse. Well, now the kids are going, oh. See, they already understand what, it's a good story, then it already explains itself. You have to explain it. It's an awful story. He explains it nevertheless. It gets worse. Then he applies it. And what does this mean to you and I, children? And by now the kids are looking out into space. They're tying each other's pigtails and throwing paper darts at each other. Here's something. Don't explain it. Don't do it. Well, what if you don't understand? Too bad. Keep going. There's a lot of stuff kids don't understand. That's part of the mystery of life. It's a good story. It stands on its own. Don't explain. Just and go on. You'll see some kids going, what do you say? What do you mean? What? See? It's all right. They can ask afterwards. You didn't get it? Wow, you stupid. Now, I've got to give you these other two things, and then we'll come back. People like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg have mastered this art of what we could call MTV editing. Do you know that MTV really saved the record industry? Some years ago, record sales were just so bad that companies were thinking of going out of business. And then marketing genius came up with the idea of putting music to pictures. And it was that link that saved the record industry. Now MTV feeds the record industry. Actually, there is a musician who came up with the idea about 4 years before that. His name was Todd Rundgren, and he said it'd be great to put pictures to this thing, to do it in video. He's sort of a one-man studio, and he plays synthesizer, guitar, bass, drums, and sings, and does the whole thing. And at least 3 or 4 years before MTV was launched, he mentioned that. That should be done. Now, what we're seeing now is that this editing technique, what you do in MTV is you cut out, again, all the boring bits. You keep everything fast-moving and mysterious, okay? You watch, wow, what is that? I don't know. Who is that? Who is that? What are you singing about? See that? You keep them thinking all the time. Now, men like Lucas and Spielberg have learned to chop out every boring thing So that when you watch something like, when Star Wars first came on, it was a total blockbuster. It's still the #1 best-selling movie of all time. Star Wars. When it came on, you're sitting there in a theater and you hear, and there's all this sound around you, and then you see this thing go past you, and oh, and then the big thing that chased it, you went, oh, you know, and afterwards, and it blew everybody away. One kid sitting in the theater watched Star Wars 237 times in a row. You know, he'd get up, pay his money, stay in the theater all day. Early in the morning, first show, there he was again. Eventually they noticed him and set up a date with Princess Leia with him. But Carrie Fisher, he didn't want a date with Carrie Fisher. It was a much more fun world inside that thing. Now, what is the power of something like an Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, or well, for instance, if you watched in Empire Strikes Back, there's a chase through a forest, the forest of Endor, where everybody's riding on. It is really interesting to watch a granddad and his grandson together watching a movie like that. I like watching audiences, you know, they're watching. Here is, in this high-speed chase, like saying, the kid is seeing everything. Oh, look, wow, see that head blow right up? Oh, look at that, see? You look at his granddad, he's in shock. What is happening? Kids have learned to follow things really fast. So what the film editors are doing are deliberately experimenting to see just how fast they can throw action up on a screen and you still consciously perceive it. The last half hour of Star Wars has more editing in it than a major 2.5-hour motion picture. And if you watch it on video anytime, you'll see the MTV editing that is used. And I'll go, I'm going under it. You can't stop that. Not like that. It's constant cut, 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 cut. Go with your one higgly-piggly. For a whole half an hour, you'll be going, one, ooh, one, two, see? And what these things do is they lock you in, force you to stay interested, right through to the end. Okay? Now, stop thinking in terms of preaching the gospel. Okay? When we look at this thing, start thinking in terms of lost audience. Why is it that these people are looking into the ceiling and are gone? Why is that? Is it because the pastor has not prayed and fasted enough? No. There is a different kind of audience in front of him than the one that grew up reading books. Different. Okay? Now, let's give you these other quick two, and then we'll come back and show you some things need to be done. The artificial interest thing, they sustain artificial interest by putting all kinds of different exciting stuff. So we could put, you see, basically, go back to a can of fizzy water. Fizzy water is boring stuff when you think about it. Just you open it, that's it. You got all kinds of stuff in there that'll kill you. Antifreeze, and they put all kinds of interesting stuff in there. To maintain interest in a commercial, they will shoot things from all kinds of different interesting angles. Good film directors will, you ever think, where's the camera in this thing? You'll have, it's really interesting. Because sometimes the camera sort of looks like it's hanging out in space, it drops, comes around, goes down on the floor, and you're thinking, boy, how do they shoot that thing? They're forcing you to stay interested by giving unusual angles. You know that when you take when you take a photo of your friends and everybody's standing, you know, like this, and they're this high, you know, because you had to get everybody in, you know, that thing. And you wonder why your pictures don't look as good as others. Well, you got your other photographers who are doing this, you know, kind of shots like this. In television, they do this. The frames are shot in all unusual action, and they have a helicopter shot from the next one sort of from the ground looking up your nose hairs, and they keep the interest by changing angles. Now, let's go back to our pastor. Where is the pastor speaking when he's giving this morning message to children? Not where I am here, but in a pulpit about 100 miles away from the closest person. He is way, way up there. And not only that, the pulpit is 50 feet above contradiction. Very, very high pulpit. See? And it is massive. See? It just has this large thing there. And what it says is, I am guru. You are devotee. See? What must you do to lessen that communication gap between you and your audience? Get as close as you can to them. That's why we throw out pulpits and put these things in. If possible, not be on a platform if you're in a church. Get as close to your audience. That's why street theater works so well. The difference between this, for instance, preaching, kids think in terms of, oh, this is a preacher. See? But if you have a musician, watch the difference in the kids. Right? Here's a stage. Here's kids. See? Speaker. Kids here. Musician. Kids climbing up on stage. See, what is the difference here? See, music and drama is involvement stuff. It gets people into the story. Speaking has normally been, I want to share with you 7 points. So keep your interest. There was a very effective church preacher called Fred Price. I don't know if you ever watched Fred. Fred's a black preacher in L.A. I watched him a few times on television, and I've come to this conclusion. I don't know why he has a pulpit in his church. He never uses it. And every time I've ever seen him, he is there with his audience, and the pulpit is way back there as part of the decoration, I think, sort of backdrop. But what Fred is doing, he's wandering up and down, Mary, you know, hey, Joe, and he's doing stuff like this. He is with his audience. Difference is this. Speakers talk to an audience. What we're looking for is people who will put their audience in their message. Now, in the old days, we need to think of the history of this thing. Why did people put a pulpit up like that? What was it there for? Why was it so high? For sound. They had no PA systems. Now you get guys like George Whitefield, who on a clear day that was rumored you could hear him from 5 miles away. He hardly needed a thing. But most normal people had to get up real high. They put a board sometimes behind them to help reflect the voices out. So you had to get up there like this with the audience out there in a place where everybody could see. And I've preached in a church over 300 years old. The pulpit was 1.5 stories high. It was this small. The church was held up by these huge pillars, but this was the only place in the entire church you could perfectly see and hear the person in that thing. If you moved just 2 feet to the whole column would cut you out. See, it was precisely designed. And we don't need that anymore. We got this. We got PA systems. We got all kinds of stuff. So now you can talk to one person like you can talk to 40,000. You could do this, talk here, have something thrown up in a video screen, 100 foot high, and just talk to 40,000 people like you talk to one. But what if you didn't know that? What if you, based on 200 years ago, stood again in the place where people did 200 years ago and shouted at the top of your voice so people could hear you, with a PA system and with a television? Which is exactly what a huge chunk of pastors is still doing. I want you to know. Now, what happens? Because we're now a high-tech church. We bought some video cameras. The sound system is killing people. They're going, ah, ah, ah. They keep moving back further. The pastor turns the volume on. Kind of a competition, you know. Anyway, as he's shouting, of course, these good video cameras are equipped with zoom lenses. The zoom lens does is it brings the person that close, right? See? But the pastor is still shouting. See? Hey! What? No! And the person, then he wonders why nobody watches his TV program. Because who likes to be shouted at from 3 inches away? Billy Graham did an interesting thing. Wally Duguid, who lives in this area, is a sound engineer for Billy. Some years ago, Billy did a crusade, and they normally just tape the crusades, you know, with persons speaking. And this particular thing, they had an embarrassing thing happen. Though they got all of Billy's stuff, they found out that about half an hour of the crusade was lost because a camera hadn't been loaded properly, see? So here they are, they got a TV special to come, and they've got half an hour of live. You can't put George Bev Shea on singing for half an hour. So when they found this out, which was straight after the thing closed, Billy came back into this empty, huge arena. There was some papers blowing in the wind, it was dark, had his overcoat on. And he said, as you can see, the crusade is over and everybody's gone home. But I've come back to talk to you. And for half an hour, Billy Graham talked to one person, and they said it was one of the most effective things we have ever done. See, television is one-on-one. That's what a talk show is. It is not yelling and screaming unless it's the Morton Downey Jr. show, which is called high audience involvement, right? Ah, you get that! You know, that thing, see? It's called artificial interest, too. Number 3, the short transit time. Now, I've already looked at this thing with your timing deal. But with everything made more exciting by cutting out the boring bits, let me ask you a question. What view do kids have of the world? Television's full of all this artificial excitement and interest. See, all the boring bits cut out. I believe the answer is Israel. In Israel, boom, you hear the sound of the jet. Right there as they're sitting in the living room, you hear the sound of a 747. TV people go, oh, of course. The next frame, they'll be in a jet. Sure enough, next frame, they're in a jet flying to Israel. What happened to the 2 weeks between? What happened to all the packing you have to do? And the getting a visa and all that stuff? What happened to all of that stuff? Well, they cut it out. It was boring. In real life, the next frame is not in Israel. They actually get hijacked and you wind up in Cuba or something. You never get to Israel. You stay in a concentration camp for 5 years. But that's exciting. You cut to that quickly. But now, take average kid's life who's learning about more from pictures than anything else, learning about what life is like. Here is the number 1 statement kids make today. Boring. It's boring. Why don't you go, boring, boring. Why? Because their picture of life is given from this. They actually learn more from television than any other single thing. As of 3 years ago, TV watching in America became the single greatest block of time that everybody does more than anything else, apart from sleeping. And even then, it's pretty close. So more than working, more than anything else, people are watching TV. Now, that is a major, major training shift. So let's put this one beside it. You ever notice how impatient kids are? Going, come, hurry up, listen. You see something? Can I have that? It might be in a year. A year? Why not now? Well, we can't afford it. I'll sell everything and I'll buy it. See, they don't. And there's no idea of putting it off. Like, why can't I get married? Well, you're only 14 years old. Well, I love you. Why can't I? See? I don't want to be a teenage spinster. Everything in television is solved in an hour. Boy meets girl, girl hates boy, crook kidnaps girl, boy rescues girl, girl still hates boy, Girl now likes crook. All of these things must be solved in a single hour with pause for commercials. Real life things don't happen like that. It takes a long time sometimes to get things done. Even in the Bible, you're witnessing an edited commercial form of recorded history. In Acts, for instance, they cut out a lot of the stuff. It just says church spread and grew everywhere. It doesn't say, now Julius Prattney, he went down and married Juliana Prattney, and they lived for a long time. And they see, it cuts all that out. It goes, there's a great miracle here, there was this. And you see it in like 3 or 4 chapters. It's all compressed. Can you tell me the effects of this lot of pictures, little words, fast-changing things in other media? Can you tell me, for instance, we see it in concerts. That's obvious. You know, you have a show in a concert. Nobody comes out and sings anymore. You've got to have lasers and smoke, and people got to fly around, and, you know, all kinds of stuff. You can't just watch it. That's why Michael Jackson's shows are always so entertaining, because he's a master of the fantasy world. He creates these, people go, oh, isn't that awesome? I mean, who cares if he sings or not? It just looks great. See that? Kiss, for instance. Those, I think with their makeup off, they look worse. They should have kept the makeup on. But a guy like Gene Simmons, when they put a show together, they didn't want people to go, wow, it was a great show. They want to go, these guys are gods, man. This is totally out of this world. It makes you feel like an ozone warrior just watching. Now, what about magazines, for instance? How have magazines, newspapers? Can you give me an example of a newspaper that has been deeply affected by MTV, that as of now is the #1 best-selling newspaper in America? That should give you a clue. Yeah, USA Today. Only the Wall Street Journal, which is a kind of a financial thing that everybody reads. USA Today, USA Today is the most popular newspaper. And have you noticed how local newspapers are changing their format? Have you ever picked up USA Today? And I heard a guy say, I will give you a couple of bucks if you can find one single opening sentence on any USA Today thing that has more than 15 words in it. See all the pictures? What about people? And see the pictures? Tons of pictures. Bleep, bleep. Little bit of stuff. Then big picture, then little bit of stuff. See? Why? Why do people do that? Because it's more visual today. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How, in the light of this, can you modify speaking? All of us are going to have to speak something. Some of you are going to be doing drama, street theater. Some of you will be singing. Some of you will be miming. Some of you will be dancing. Some of you will be doing puppets. You'll be doing all kinds of stuff. In the light of what we've given you here, what changes must you make in what you do when you actually are talking to people? Okay? This thing here means, because they're a sampling thing, then what you do is you give your stuff in samples. Okay? Practice one-liners. You know what a one-liner is? It's a statement that sums up maybe an awful lot of thought to get that one-liner. Matter of fact, here's the thing. Your opening 30 seconds is when kids are going to decide whether you're worth listening to or not. That opening 30 seconds is going to make or break it. Now, we're not doing in these classrooms what, obviously, because it's more a teaching thing and rather than a reaching thing. You understand that in actual preaching type situations where you're trying to get an unsaved audience to stay, your opening 30 seconds is probably the most important thing of all. Just like flipping a channel. Bleep. You see something. Am I going to watch it or not? It's boring. Somebody's talking. Bleep. And you're gone. What is a one-liner? One-liner is when you think a lot about something and then you're able to compress it down into one little single statement. All great street preachers have one-liners. You learn that. You know, develop some. I was in Australia at the start of this year. We had had the largest turnout of any Christian thing in the history of that city. It was kids came out, the woodwork, all churches cooperated, had a lot of kids come to this thing. We had to move it to the dog track to hold the crowds of people that were there. It was good. That mayor and all the other people came out in the city and stuff. So in the middle of it, ABC, Australian Broadcasting, which is secular television, no real Christian television over there, apart from a few little inserts into things, sticks this ice cream under my nose and says, "You think this is a bit unusual with all these young people coming out for a religious gathering?" See, now, what are you going to do? You're going to sit and go, "Well, actually, let me give you a little of the philosophy or the background." See, they don't care. People are going to be watching for maybe 5 seconds. They're going to decide whether or not they're going to listen or not. Television's always like that, little bits. I said, "Actually, this isn't a religious gathering. It's Christian. And this is unusual only here in our backslidden West. In the rest of the world, all kinds of fun things are happening like this." And then he said, "Well, what do you think of naming certain famous television evangelists who just blown it in America?" Now what are you going to do? "Well, let me share with you the Christian principle." I said, "It's about time you guys in the media said that immorality was wrong. You never said it before." Okay? Now that's a two-liner. But understand that, see, what are we looking at behind that? I didn't just come out of heaven. I sat down and thought for a long time what the implications of the media getting on the case of Christians who blew it were. And one of the major ones is the media are hypocritical. Their own morality, especially men in key leadership places, is atrocious. And Christian bashing has become a very significant thing. If you did it with Jewish people or black people or gays, you would be in serious trouble in this country. But Christian bashing has become a popular sport. So what you do is you think very hard about what is the implication of this statement. And if you can write it out in a single sentence, you understand it. If you can't, you probably don't, which is a great test for a message. Can you write what you want to say in a one-liner? If not, you're probably either trying to say too much or you still don't know what you're talking about. You ever heard this? Kids say, "What was the meeting?" "Oh, it was wonderful." "What did he say?" "I don't know. I have no idea at all what I'm talking about." It was profound, though. This artificial interest, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to maintain an MTV generation of people? Shoot silly string at them. That is the first thing. Everybody buy a can of silly string. No, do whatever you can to involve them. That's why I like these kind of things and not, this thing here, mic that sticks up over here that they force you to use, standing in this pulpit 400 feet wide. How can you do anything? Your face is going to be locked in like that for an hour. So disconnect from that thing. Get away if you can. See, I have fun. I go out. I get people in the back. See, I have all kinds of fun. I give them a hard time, get the backsliders. I even leave. I walk out. Goodbye. And with the mic, see, with a radio mic too, or a long, long cord, they can still hear you. You can be talking outside. "Hey, it's nice out here, See, keep the interest by keeping moving all the time. Keep shifting. Don't get them guessing where you're going to come from. Ah! See, don't be afraid, by the way, to be childlike. Let me give you some comments. See, some of you think, "Well, this is not very Christian. I don't know." Now, I don't usually do this with a group of Wall Street businessmen, okay? We're talking about kids who are deeply, deeply affected by television. The more of a youth-type audience you have, and adults don't mind. If kids are having fun, the adults will put up with it. But you must maintain. Remember, you're an audience that is very easily bored. So keep shifting what you're talking about. Don't stay. Let me diagram it for you. Here is the old way of speaking. Point one, there are many paths in life. We have a lot of different paths in life, don't we? Point two,
Which path are you on? Point 3, it is probably the wrong one. Point 4, the end of that path is not very nice.
See? Now, this is sort of teaching. See? It's like fence posts. What you need to do with this is to put a bunch, say the same thing about 14 different ways. Because somebody's not going to get it one way, so say it another way. Say the same thing different ways. Here's what I want you to do. Take messages, spoken messages that you've heard, or that even they're written, as long as they haven't been edited. Take a spoken message and analyze it, and you'll see an interesting thing. If you drew it out, you'll probably find the person will say that same thing 2 or 3 different times in 2 or 3 different ways. And if you wrote it out, it would look like poetry. Would it go like this? Jesus is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. Boom, 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 boom. See? Do that. Bunch of stuff. Hammer. It's like a nail hit. 1, 2, 3. Like that. This constantly shifting will drive people crazy, but kids will like it. And the wonderful thing about kids is that they are able to shift emotionally very fast. They can laugh their heads off 1 second, be crying their eyes out the next, just like this. Here's average kid's life during week. Monday, Tuesday, like that. Keep everything short. By the way, you can speak for a long time to kids if everything is short within it. And pastors say, young people won't listen for more than 15 minutes. Not on one thing they will. They won't listen more than 30 seconds on one thing. But if you keep shifting it all the time, keep moving, keep your illustrations moving, leave things unexplained sometimes. Jesus didn't always tell a story and then say, now let me explain this story. He just, look at Revelation. Did he explain that? I wish Spielberg would do Revelation just as it is. That would freak people completely out of their heads. The book of Revelation. Special effects by Industrial Light and Magic. All right, how's that time? Are we getting close to 10 minutes? 10 minutes. It's amazing. Time flies when you're having fun. Let me then give you a little connection here with what Jesus preached and how he preached. Have you ever wondered how Jesus preached to people? I want to take something which is basically Sermon on the Mount. Okay? Who analyzes, says Greg Lewis from this book, wonderful book, Inductive Preaching, Helping People Listen. Who analyzes Jesus' message, the Sermon on the Mount, as an 18-minute sermon with dozens of examples, visual images, scores of comparisons, and interest-catching devices as diverse as riddles, sex appeal, and everyday experience. Can Jesus teach us anything about preaching? And here is the difference between the deductive thing and the inductive. How many of you have been Christians for more than 5 years? Put your hands up. How many have ever heard of the Sermon on the Mount? Put your hands up. Okay? Wonderful. How many have actually read this sermon? Okay? Now, here's the difference between deductive and inductive. Can you tell me the 6th beatitude? Now look at the way your minds are going, though. When you think 6th beatitude, it's going, let's see, what's it? Blessed are point 1, point 2. See how you're thinking like that? I could have made it harder. I could say, start with the last beatitude, back up to and tell me what it is. Let's see, there's 8 of them. Let's see, 8, the last one. See? Okay, now we'll give you something else. This is inductive. Do you know the story of the prodigal son? Pick it up where he's with the pigs. Give me a flashback on how he got there, and then finish it off. And you can do it easy. See that? You can do it easy. Why? Because you remember stories. Points are hard to remember. So what you should look for, pray for, and keep your eyes open for are good stories. Be a good story collector. There are some people to whom good stories come naturally. Tony Campolo seems to always come up with good stories. He probably invents some of them, but they're wonderful stories. He talked about being in a plane one time, sitting next door to a guy who was smoking a cigar in a non-smoking seat. A cigar. You're not allowed to smoke cigars in planes. So Tony said to him, "Excuse me, this is non-smoking. Could you put your cigar out?" The guy went, blew smoke right in his face. All right, Tony's Italian. He calls over the stewardess. He goes, "Excuse me." He said, "You know, this man is smoking. This is a non-smoking seat, and it's a cigar." Stewardess said, "Sir, you'll have to put that out. It's a cigar. We don't allow cigars in airplanes. And it's a non-smoking seat." You know what he did? He blew right in her face. So she looked at Tony like, you know, what can I do? You know, I can't throw him off the plane where it... So anyway, Tony was just sitting there fuming. He didn't know what to do. And he said, just then, the plane hit a mighty air pocket, just as the stewardess was going past with a tray of drinks. He said, the drinks, he was sitting in the aisle, and this guy was sitting beside him. The drinks went up in the air, missed him completely, and landed all over this guy. Put his cigar out, soaked him, and this gorgeous stewardess fell in my lap. And then he said, "And you say there is no God." Now, the deductive method and the inductive method is real different. The inductive, this is the way it works. First, for instance, you ask many questions. Why do you ask questions? It makes people think, and it involves them in the thing. See? For instance, I'll say, now, how many of you, do you see that? And anybody go, see? You say, "Oh, yes, Simon." And you may not even want an answer. It's a rhetorical question, it can be. How many of you have come here with needs and problems in your life? You know, people go, "Me, I came here, I brought a problem." You see that? It's not necessarily that. The Sermon on the Mount in this little short thing has 19 questions in it. It is loaded up with questions. It's only got 2,320 words, and there are 19 questions in it. There are 348 images or pictures in this thing, different images or pictures. In an 18-minute message, 348 different images or pictures. 221 times Jesus uses this phrase, "you." Now, how many times have you heard this in a poem? There are many people somewhere out here beyond the bounds of our church. See that? Here's what Jesus said. You know, it's me. I mean, you don't mean somebody out there? We often talk like, there are a lot of people, of course, wouldn't be anybody I'm speaking to today, and I don't even know why I'm speaking to you, but there are a lot of people. See? Jesus is personal, direct, you. Now, I want you to see the difference in tenses. In the Sermon on the Mount, have a guess which would be the most well-used tense in the Sermon on the Mount. We've got tenses like past, present, future. Present is the number one tense used. 65% of the Sermon on the Mount is all in the present right now. Okay? Here's the difference. In this kind of stuff, the audience plays a part of authority. In other words, the audience is going to decide whether or not they want to listen to you. And the other one, you're sort of like the guru. See, like, I'm here because I'm going to share with you something that you ignorant clods do not know. Now, our modern audiences sit there and they go like this, I don't care who this guy is. He can be president, he can be king, he can be famous movie star. I don't know whether I believe him or not. The way they find out that is to match what you're saying with their own present experiences. They go, is that like it is or not? Yeah, that's like it is. Okay, I'll listen a bit more. Do you see that? So Jesus uses present all the time. 65%. The next major tense, out of the two we got left, future. You're right, future. Future is used 30%. Because it's mysterious. Jesus is always talking about what is to come. Gives you an idea. This guy knows where he's going. And guess how much of his message is the past? 5%. Just 5. What's the past? Tradition? What has been said before? History a little bit? You have heard it said, Jesus offers, but I say to you. Boom. All right. And having put that together, it gives us a little idea of what we're supposed to be doing in our stuff. These books I do recommend strongly. How to Speak to Youth, Ken Davis, group magazine publication, and it's got a lot of stuff on preparing your message. It shows you how to lay stuff out, think through it so you know what you're talking about. And then this one here is a great analysis of the difference between inductive and deductive and the shift that has taken place because of that. All right, that's part 1. And with that, we will take a break.
Hey, you recording?
We have been looking at the major differences that have come about because of the changes in perception. We've called these two differences deductive and inductive. Deductive being a way of learning things that is more point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, involves a lot of logic and facts. Inductive deals more with pictures. It deals with questions and experiences. And what we have said here is that for the first time in a long time, about 500 years, people have begun to move away from the way they used to learn stuff with print back to an old way of learning things. And that way is and involves these kind of things. Let's put them up here. We'll call it, it involves storytelling. It involves music and song. It involves dance. It involves drama. It involves group interaction and participation. Now, what we're talking about, is this stuff new stuff? Is this all new? It was only invented since television? No, it's not. It's been around since the dawn of time. Now, I'm Maori by my background. Our Maori people in New Zealand, we didn't have a bunch of books that the Tohunga printed up. What we had is we had dance, we had music. You learned stuff about your country and you learned stuff about your tribe by watching somebody do something. See, you watched it. It's called modeling, which is another part of this whole inductive process. By drama, you acted out something. By talking close in groups and all that. What we're saying is that for 500 years of print, we have learned primarily this way and also studied that way. Now we're going back to learning this way and hopefully studying that way. Okay. Let's look at a little bit of history. I mentioned to you George Whitefield. When George Whitefield was 21 years old, he had 50,000 people coming out in the snow to hear him speak at 6 in the morning. Okay? No microphone. Just George Whitefield. Let me ask you a question. What do you think George Whitefield's sermons were like? if you pick up one of them printed, and I've got some of them, you'll be absolutely disappointed. You'll wonder, what in the fat did anybody ever listen to this for? Because somebody asked George Whitefield when he was alive, can we reprint your sermons? You know what he said? Yes, if you include the fire and the lightning. Now, most of George's written stuff is actually very poor. In other words, if you look at it like this, you think, well, you know, he said a few good things, but psh. But when George Whitefield actually preached, he was a totally dramatic preacher. You see, he grew up in a pub, in a bar. His dad died, his mother remarried. The guy that she married ran a bar. So George Whitefield's childhood was spent among hookers and pimps and highway robbers. Those were his friends and the people he grew up with. He was also a great mimic, and his favorite trick was to take off on preachers. He was a Flip Wilson. He had all of these minister imitations he used to do. Then he got saved. So what he was then was this incredibly dramatic guy. If you can imagine either a Bill Cosby or an Eddie Murphy saved in England, then you got an idea what George Whitefield was like. But he was dramatic. He was so powerfully dramatic that not only did ordinary people come out to hear him, children and everything, also the great literary figures of his time came out just to listen. He came to America a couple of times. People like Benjamin Franklin and others just crowded in to hear him. He was just so astonishingly good. He was a dramatic, dramatic person. As a matter of fact, he was telling a story one time, and one of the #1 literary figures of his time, Lord Chesterfield, sitting on a horse with his friend, all these society people out on the fringes of the crowd of 30 or 40,000, listening to Whitefield preach. And Whitefield was describing a sinner like a blind man who was walking towards the edge of a cliff. And his dog ran off, and he dropped his stick. And Whitefield brought out this sinner right out to the edge of the cliff. And then he took a step forwards, and Chesterfield was so into the message, he went, "My God, he's gone!" He forgot it was a sermon. Okay? He is so wrapped up in it. Do you see that? He forgot he was listening to a preacher. He was actually in the illustration. He could see it. He was part of it. That is MTV preaching. Okay? Here's what Whitefield used to do. Every morning they had hangings, public hangings. People were getting hung for stealing a loaf of bread and all this stuff. So every morning the whole town crowded down to the public hanging place to cheer as the people were hung. I mean, it was really, if you think times are bad in L.A., the gangs, you should have seen Whitefield's time. All the kids got front row places to watch, and they would watch, 5 or 6 people. Hey, it's getting hung today. Oh, they got old Joe. Oh, too bad, Joe. And they're all there. Here's what Whitefield did. The moment the hangings were finished, Whitefield would get up on the scaffold and preach from the scaffold. And the crowd wouldn't leave. They just sit there. He got up one time, he announced his text. "It is appointed unto man once to die," said George Whitefield. There's a shriek from the audience. "Ah!" See, there's a silence. And then a couple of his workers pushed through the crowd, and they looked up and they said, "Cry aloud and spare not, Brother George. An immortal soul has just passed into eternity." Somebody had died right there. So Whitefield stopped and he said, "It is appointed unto man once to die." And there's another shriek, and a second person died. It was recorded that they paid very particular attention that day. Whitefield was not only loud, he was also incredibly, his voice was just an incredible voice. He was kind of a Richard Burton type voice, that rich. Matter of fact, the top Shakespearean actor of his day, a guy called Robert Garrick, said he would give 1,000 gold sovereigns, it's a considerable sum of money, to be able to say the word "oh" like George Whitefield. Now, one of my all-time favorite preachers, and man certainly with content in his life, if you said a man who was a thinking person, had a lot of logic and facts, was Charles Finney. I now want to give you the #2 major criticisms of Charles Finney's ministry by other ministers in his time. Would you like to hear what they were? Number one was, he does not look like a minister. He didn't dress in the requisite black suit with the collar and the gray wig and the whole thing. He wore a business type thing. And it doesn't even look like a minister. And the ministers were freaked out over there. Number two, he doesn't preach. That was the second major criticism of Charles Finney. He does not preach. He just explains what other people preach and tells stories. When you read Finney, and I've got probably most of what Finney ever wrote, it's still in print somewhere, and you see these pictures of Finney, and they're sort of taken when he's nearly 80 years old, and he's got these burnt cork-looking eyes, and you think, oh, shoot, you know, who is this guy, man? But Finney was like Davy Crockett. That's really what he was. When he was saved, he was a young man, tall, blue-eyed, a frontiers man. He said in his biography he could outthrow, outrun, and outwrestle any man he met. And we're talking about a tall, Dallas Cowboys-looking guy who had an incredible sense of humor, was a musician and a singer, who played in the orchestra at church and joined the choir because he liked one of the girls in the choir, and he was studying to be a lawyer. So what you got then from that background, he was so dramatic when he preached that people were totally freaked out. He'd say, he would describe what happens when a sinner passes into the presence of God. And if you read occasionally in these sermons, which were handwritten by people who were just there writing as fast as they could write, you can occasionally pick up in what sometimes took 2 hours compressed into the space of what can be read in maybe 30 minutes. But I have a book that was written by a guy who was in Finney's Bible College and who was there when they called him President Finney, and there was actual, literal conversation written down. Finney speaking, the reaction of the audience, not edited. Now here's something I want you to try. Have you ever had a really exciting conversation with somebody, you know, where you both talk, oh, no, this kind of thing? Here's what you want you to try and do. Tape it. Tape it. And then try and type up about 10 minutes of your conversation, exactly as it is. And it'll look weird to you. You ever seen a transcription of what you've said? It's really strange. It's not at all like things are in books. And most of it, you've got to put all these dots and sounds and things. Because here's what it really looks like. It's like that. Now, how do you put that in print? See? Here's the way we actually learn. We don't learn, first of all, information-wise. We learn by spirit, and then by character, and last by information. I'll give you the order of it. It goes like this. This is called a divine order and truth. And it's real simple. Number one, this is the way God teaches, actually, and it's probably easily applicable to the way we should teach. Revelation School, God speaks. So we're dealing here first with the spirit and the attitude of a person. How do we know that something is right or wrong? The first way in the Bible is by the spirit and the attitude of somebody. See? Number two, we could call this practical service. This is called you do it. God speaks, you do it. And this has to do with the fruit and the character of a person's life. By fruit, I mean the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, character things, see? The last one is illumination, which is called, he explains it. And then after this, you put maybe, because the explanation is optional. Okay? This is the way God speaks. He speaks, then you do it, then he might explain it. Okay? Here's the way we learn in the Western world. First you explain it. Then you decide whether you're going to do it, and finally you wind up spiritual. Finney said over 100 years ago, this was the divine order. If you reverse it, this is the kind of generation you get. Skeptical, cynical, rationalistic, fault-finding, nitpicking, and critical. Who either have no faith or hold very loosely to things that do not admit of clear, immediate explanation. That's the generation you live in. Okay? What I'm trying to point out here is that this thing is not first. It is not first in the way we learn. You know what I used to do? Turn off the sound on TV preachers and watch them. Try it sometimes. It's real interesting. You get a guy going like this. You turn on the sound and he goes, God loves you. It's really funny, see? Body language. Look at it. Look at your body language. See? Some of you are cold. Others are, I don't believe that. Hey? Your body tells more about you. Your body expresses more about you. When you just forget yourself and just be yourself, that's where people pick up things. They pick up your spirit and your attitude. They pick up your character next. And finally, they hear the content of what you're saying. This has to do, this last one, with doctrine and with content of our thing. What I'm trying to show you is that even in the way we learn things, the biblical way is more like this, and then moves to that. What is this book but a bunch of stories linked together with teaching things? It opens up with the story of creation, the story of the fall, and so on. Picks up with the story of Abraham, goes all the way through, and stuck in between you've got stuff like genealogies and some psalms and some songs and some... See that? That's what this is. The whole book is like that. Therefore, when we're aiming here at getting an audience, the thing we've got to really work on are these two things. First, kids are going to decide, do I want to listen from your spirit and from your attitude? That will be communicated immediately to them the moment you get up. Before you've said a word, before you've done anything, they will pick up an attitude. See that? You get up and think like this. Rotten people you are. I'm going to say something to you today. And they go, oh, shoot, you know. They'll look for this. What is our big problem today? Our big problem is that the secular world has taken aim at this area here. The secular world doesn't care what we say. What its aim and its attack on the Christian church has been on these two things. What it says is this. Number one, you guys are a bunch of bigoted, prejudiced, ignorant nerds. Archie Bunker. Okay? Who is the number one most effective evangelist on television today? Who? Billy Graham. No. He's very effective. He's spoken to more people than anybody else in history. No. Not Jimmy. No. No. Not Richard Roberts. No. Who? Yeah, very close. Bill Cosby. Norman Lear. It's probably affected more people. Who's Norman Lear? Pee Wee Herman. He's an effective evangelist. Do you understand? I didn't say Christian evangelist. I just said evangelist. What we're talking about, the ability to affect people with a message. And that's why Bill Cosby is the number one entertainer. See, look at Cosby and think in terms of it. What have we got? We've got a person who is projecting good character. See that? Family man, strongly committed, fun, humorous. I mean, you know that. Look at the show. The Family, see? Smart, articulate, funny, willing to bend, to change, bunch of stuff. We're looking here at an attitude and a spirit when Cosby gets up, there's not a meanness in him. There's kind of like a, hey, welcome to my world thing. It's not that cynical Las Vegas kind of, you know. And that's why little kids as well as grandparents have adopted him as their number one best paid entertainer in the world right now. Boom. Back a little bit in history, last week I was with, this is real short history. Last week I was in a church in Illinois that is modeled after the church started by Amy Semple McPherson in Los Angeles, Angeles Temple. I mean, you know, Foursquare Church. Jack Hayford is probably the best well-known representative of Foursquare people today. But not a lot of you probably know much about Amy Semple. Amy, the lady who started the Foursquare, if she had been alive today, would probably be one of the most popular women in America, because she was almost 60 years ahead of her time, a real MTV preacher. Now here's what. I talked to this guy who had worked with her. Spent 2 or 3 hours just picking his brains. Amy was a woman. First of all, she could dress totally classically. She could have these designer dresses on, like this, Hollywood, remember? Hollywood, early days of Hollywood. And then dress totally plain and not jar. She was comfortable with both sides of society. She was dressed ordinary. She was awesome, and dressed classically, and she was awesome. She was so dramatic. Now, girls, be encouraged. She was such an incredible preacher, just speaking, that she had debates with top evolutionists of her time. Took them on public, whatever. But Sunday nights, she put on an entire production. I met one of her guys who was working, who's still alive. He was a special effects supervisor in Hollywood. He got saved. He was in a church. Here's what she would say. Men, I'm going to preach on the last days of Pompeii this Sunday. I want a volcano to erupt behind me with lava flowing down around the sides of the stage and screams of the people in the background. And they would do it. They'd say, oh, okay, and they'd get Jell-O and pump it out, and, you know, they'd do all this stuff. Now, when you went to Angeles Temple, you not only saw somebody who was just articulate and full of life, full of fun, full of power, you saw a whole thing. You saw a whole dramatic production. When Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs came out, it was a big hot thing, remember? This is an early release of Snow White. She did a whole thing of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for a sermon. She did a whole, I don't know what she preached on, but she had them all dressed up with the different dwarfs, and the whole cast who were involved in the animation and putting together were in that service. And this is the third one. I'll throw this in. What do you think miracles are? Miracles are God's MTV. They are demonstrations in an encapsulated form of what he's like. John is in prison. He's about to have his head cut off. He's not sure now whether what he did was right or not. All of his disciples are gone. They've joined up with Jesus. Now he's wondering, did I get into the right thing, or was this a major mistake? So he sends his disciples to go and ask Jesus, are you he really that should come, or should we look for somebody else? You know what Jesus said? Not go and tell John these scriptures which show that I am the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Not tell John to read the scrolls of Isaiah and some of these passages in Habakkuk and others. He said, go and show John the things that you see. The blind eyes are opened, the deaf hear, the poor have the gospel preached to them. Go and show John. See? That is called visual, pictorial demonstration. Yonggi Cho says that visions and dreams are the language of the Holy Spirit. You ever thought about language? What it is? You write a word down. What does that word mean? It's a little mark, see? It's a bunch of little marks you learn, remember? You write down A, B, and you put it down. Now that word is a symbol for something. It's sophisticated, but you've got to go through a process. Go symbol, picture, reality. I was in Switzerland with a friend of mine, an American guy, who I thought spoke French, but he didn't speak any. He said, I'm going to go down and get some eggs from the supermarket. You want to come with me? I said, oh, fine. I was hoping you'd just break into French. And he didn't know any. I said, you're crazy. You don't know. How are you going to order? He said, I'll figure it out. So he goes down there, and this is what he goes. Mademoiselle, s'il vous plaît. He goes, oh, oui, no, come on. What do we got here? We got pictures. Okay? Now think of this verse. In the last days I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. And your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. And if there's ever been a time where people and understand dreams and visions, it's now. So much of what God does in the Bible is really this. And then you think about it. You understand? You get something and then you process it. So what we're calling on here is not some immediate adaptation to something that's only about 30 years old. We're talking about a going back to the way people did things before. Now I'm going to ask you another question. What patterns do kids have on listening to somebody speak? That's like a secular audience. What models do they have of listening to somebody speak? Their parents? No. Average parent only spends about 12 seconds a week with his kid. An intelligent conversation other than pass the butter, and I'm going now. The only model a kid has is a teacher. And very rarely is that a great model. So when you ask a kid to come and listen to somebody speak, they think, what is that? Comedian they understand, concert they understand, movie they understand, even a play they understand. But what is speaking? Kids have no model of speaking. It's not that they don't like it, it's just they've got no model for it. That's why some of the most effective speakers are not speakers. They are something else. They're a comedian. They're a musician. They're a... See that? And that is a valid way to get the gospel through. You don't need to explain a lot when you see somebody healed. And, you know? I was in a Catherine Kuhlman meeting a long time ago. She's still alive. I was sitting up in a balcony, and I'd brought with me a young man who come from a family, medical doctors in his family, who did not believe that God could heal today. I was sitting in this huge shrine auditorium, packed to the gills, 3 hours before it had opened. There were more people that would fit in. And I certainly, and everybody in there had not come to hear Catherine's awesome preaching. The incredible content that she passed on. Matter of fact, and I don't know if you ever saw Catherine Kuhlman or any of you have seen things of her, if God had not helped her, she would have looked a total jerk. She came out sort of floating across the stage. It was just funny. One time I was sitting on the platform and I couldn't believe it. Here I am, a scientist. I said, oh dear Jesus. God has got to help this lady or she's in serious trouble. Because she was not anywhere near the preacher that Amy Semple McPherson was. And she was wandering around on stage just really hoping that God would do something, which he always did in great kindness. But I was sitting in the audience one time, and I watched this. This friend of mine sitting with me, young man, kind of a bit on a hippie search. He'd come over to the U.S., got away from his parents, and they asked if we could take care of him for the first couple of weeks to get him acclimatized. We took him to one of these services. He's sitting in there. His eyes are real big. Shrine is packed out with people. And sitting in front of us is an older couple. And then over here, a couple that had brought a Chinese man who was crippled, sitting there like that. So everybody's talking, you know. And Catherine Kuhlman comes on. She was wandering around. Hello, have you been waiting for me? She does all this stuff. We're just talking away, and then suddenly the room fills up with a sense of the presence of God. You talk about participation. See? And then the miracles start happening. And right in front of us, this old couple, the guy goes like this. And he's there, you know, like this. And he whispers to his wife, I can hear this ear. I can hear in this ear again. And where there's a little dot there on the stage, Catherine Kuhlman, floating around. Up there on the balcony, there's a man that's been healed in your right ear, just like that. See? And then this couple down there, they go, look, look, and this Chinese man they brought is out of his wheelchair, running. This kid, now, what is the content of this message? This kid goes, breaks down. Catherine Kuhlman said, anyone want to get baptized in the Spirit? He runs. See? Come from a denomination that preached against it. Now, you could have given him 800 verses of Scripture to show how this cannot happen today. But he sat and watched God put on his own little MTV thing. See that? That's why the miraculous is one of the major ways God demonstrates his reality. That's why, give it this way, he speaks, you do it. He may explain it. Remember Naaman? Go dunk yourself in a river 7 times. Naaman's conclusion, that's stupid. There are much better rivers, like this greasy Jordan River stuff. It's cold. And 7 times, why 7? Why not once? Why doesn't he just come out like Oral Roberts and go, let faith rise, you know? There's no explanation, wasn't it? It's just, God said it, you do it. And he finally did it. Doesn't say he with joy did it. Oh, yeah, I'm into it. But he did it. He did it 7 times, and the 7th time he came out healed. Because God is much more concerned that you do what he says than you understand what he says. The simple fact is, we're not always going to understand what he says. Our one single brain cell is not able to process all of God's thinking. That's why I don't care about explaining everything to kids. I may know what it means. Somebody else may know what it means. They go, oh, I know what that means. But some kid is going to go, I don't know, what do you mean by that? That's why we're mentioning again, MTV has a lot of bizarre and mysterious stuff in it. Why? Because kids talk about it afterwards. What do you think he meant by that? I don't know. You see that thing in the corner there? What was that? See? What do they do with our messages? Hey, I understood what he meant. You know? Do you see what I'm talking about? Don't be afraid to be like Jesus. Disciples come, what did you mean by that? I got a lot of things to say, but you can't handle them now. Goodbye. Like that. I want to give you one last little deal on this, and then we're going to... I have to hurry up. Shift to my one higgledy-piggledy. I was in Spring Harvest 2 or 3 years ago. Spring Harvest is a phenomenon. It's happened in England, an interdenominational convention held over Easter time that has jumped from around 40 people 9 years ago to 60,000 last year. That is a phenomenon in any country, let alone England. It's one of the most atheistic, post-Christian nations in the Western world. Well, I was asked to speak there. I'm the only overseas speaker, okay? And I get a tent full of 5,000 kids in this particular area to speak to. Sitting on the platform are some of England's finest expository, didactic preachers. We got the John Stott type guys there, all right? The Anglican vicars who have done detailed expositions in the Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic on everything. Now I have to go and talk to 5,000 English kids, and it's not them that are bothering me. It's the platform crew I'm with. Okay? And I'm sitting up there. See, I always sit in the corner. I flick through things. I make people nervous. I tell pastors, don't put me up on stage. Don't do it. Because I'm doing this. I'm looking and writing and scribbling. And you know why I'm doing stuff like that? I'm trying to stay free. I'm trying to stay clear so I can hear if God... I don't want something, this is what I'm going to say, and I don't care what you think I'm going to say. Anyway, I'm trying to stay as sensitive as I can to changes in what's going on around me so I can shift any direction. So I'm doing this. I'm in the corner. And these ministers are sort of looking over like, hasn't he got his message ready yet? You know, like this. I'm over there, flick, 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 flick. Well, the music goes past, and they introduce me. I get up. I'm sitting up there. I'm sort of like 60 seconds, and I'm on. I'm asking God what I always ask him. Give me conviction, compassion, and communication, those three things. Always pray for that every time I speak. Conviction, what is said will be true. Compassion, that people know I love them enough to die for them. And number 3, communication, that I will have the gift of keeping an audience, which I never had when I was an unsaved person. I had no communication of any kind at all. Totally shy, absolutely withdrawn, no ability to speak to one person, let alone an audience. So I'm praying. Just before I get up, the guy puts his hand on me, this guy who is the world authority on Puritanism. He's sitting right in front of me. He goes, preach the word, brother. Now, look out. There are 5,000 kids there, and I got a choice. Do I please God and help these kids, or do I please this man? That's my choice. I voted with God and the kids, and feel I have to somehow help. Afterwards, I got to get away as fast as possible. So we had a great time. We ran out of counselors. We ran out of counseling space. We had an awesome move of God. But now I've got to go pack my bags and meet Mr. Puritanism, who is still there, who is waiting for me. Everybody else is gone. He's still up on the platform guarding my bag. All right? So I go back up there, and I'm trying not to look. I'm packing this MTV as fast as I can. And he goes, excuse me, brother, may I have a word with you? And I thought, this is it. Now I die. And he said, do you know what you preach like? Now, I've heard it all. Clown, you know, all this thing. I said, no. He said, you preach like the old Puritan preachers preached. And that totally shocked me. But I realized something. Written is different from speaking. Puritans had big blocks of written stuff. But they had children too. Martin Luther, that guy whose Reformation triggered under him, and the advent of print changed the world, said, I speak not for the university professors of my congregation, about 2,000 people he had, of which there are 14, but for the children and the housewives, of which there are 2,000. And when you look at Martin Luther, he's blunt, funny, tactless. If you read his table talk, he's like Keith Green, you know. He was a musician. People went around not thinking sort of Reformation thoughts, but singing songs like A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. And that's how it spread. Now, I'm trying to make you comfortable here on something. It is not wrong to be real and be yourself. Okay, that? And some of you have been thinking, this is embarrassing because I am not a teenager and I don't even know why I'm in this class. It doesn't matter. I'm not a teenager. I'm 44 years old. I've been working with kids for 25 years. I'm not a teenager. They don't think I'm a teenager. I don't pretend to be a teenager, though Luis Palau called me last year the world's oldest living teenager. I only want to do 2 things. Number 1, represent God to kids and represent kids to God. That's it. You can be an adult. You can be a grandmother or a granddad. I met a guy who was preaching before Billy Graham preached, who is still talking to high school kids and doing great. Because he loves them. Because he tells them the truth. Because he's real. Because he's funny. And because he studied his audience. Okay. Now, in these last few minutes, let me just very quickly give you 3 ways to research. You have to, what we're looking at here is how to pick up material, because a lot of people go, well, where do you get your ideas from? And how do you, I don't know where to start. So here's where to start. I want you to do three things. Number one, spend a lot of time with your audience. Who do you want to talk to? You called to witness to Muslims? Then spend a lot of time with Muslims. Who are you called to witness to? God has called me to kick the cheese out of Taekwondo people. And spend a lot of time with those people. This is called personal. Why do you want to spend time with them? Because you will never understand your audience until you spend time with an audience. And a key thing here is this. In Ezekiel 3, verses 14 to 15, Ezekiel had a message to deliver. This is Ezekiel 3, 14 to 15. The Bible says he went down, and all the captives, his nation was in captivity, lined up along the banks of this river Chebar. The Bible says he went in the bitterness and the heat of his spirit. How many of you are a little bit angry with what is going on in the world today? A little bit angry. All right. How many are a lot angry with what is going on in the world today? Here is a danger. When you see just how wrong things are, you see kids, they're callous and cynical, and you're dangerous. Have you seen a youth group like this? Seen a cynical, callous youth group? This kind of thing? Your danger will be that the anger you have against unrighteousness will come out instead in bitterness and heat of the Spirit. This is what you look like. All right, shut up, all right? Shut up. They may shut up, but you've lost an audience. Because what comes through is not concern or truth, but bitterness. A lot of parents do that. They find out the kid's done something. You what? You're smoking pot? I love you in the Lord. See, and what comes through is not concern, but bitterness. Here's what God's cue was. Go sit down where they sit. So he said, I sat where they sat. And afterwards, for a month, he's sitting there with them, just sitting, listening, not speaking, not preaching, just listening. And afterwards, he said, I was greatly astonished. Now, we need to do something, and it is this. If you spend time with people who are hurting, it will modify not what you're saying, but how you say it. You ever seen people witness about cults or talk about the cults? You know how different it would be if you had a whole audience full of those cults? Do you see what I'm saying? We do these little snide things, put down snide things, but if you really had the real person sitting there, you would say things differently. That's why. Spend time with your audience. Who are you called to? Are you called to witness to street people? Spend time with street people. How do you do that? You've got to find out where they are. Scotland, in a YWAM base years ago, a friend of mine, we went there, said, we're going to try and reach the kids in this town. I said, fine. They said, we're going to do open air meetings. I said, that's wonderful. We'll go out and help. They said, okay, we're going out at lunchtime. I said, lunchtime, okay. So we get there, and we're in downtown at lunchtime from about 1 o'clock. I said, have you had some effective meetings? They said, no, we've not seemed to reach a lot of kids. I said, where are kids on a school week at lunchtime? There are no kids in this entire street except those that are wagging it from school. And the only people here are ladies with babies in strollers. You could have some child evangelism here, but you certainly have a street meeting. And I said, oh yes. See, this is called going where the fish are. And I said, where are kids in any large numbers in this town? They said, when the picture theater comes out, there's all kinds of kids waiting for the buses. I said, how long are they there? They said, about an hour, 2 hours sometimes. I said, what do? They just stand around and hang around. I said, that's when you run your street meeting. They said, but it's too late. It's like 11 o'clock at night. I said, then sleep in the day and go out at nighttime. Go where your audience is. Spend time with your audience. Take them out, not in religious things. I learn more about kids over pizza than I ever do in churches. Just talk with them. Spend time with them. Number 2. Practically, you need to spend some time studying the forces and pressures that shape their culture. That means you've got to study, just like a missionary does, the major things that your mission field is interested in. So what does that mean? It means you've got to have a working acquaintance with the songs, with the movies, with the cartoons, with the comedians, with whatever the kids that your particular audience is interested in. Why do you do that? Because you're worldly and you really enjoy everything? No, because if you are a missionary, you're supposed to understand your mission field. That means you spend time with it. Now, it doesn't mean, here's a key here, and a lot of people freak out on this. They go, well, if you do that, you become worldly. How can you study it without being affected by it? Here's the secret. You increase your sensitivity to what you're already exposed to without necessarily increasing your exposure. Say it again. Increase your sensitivity to what you're already exposed to without necessarily increasing your exposure. I am not advocating to you that you should go out and watch every movie that comes out, go to every concert. First, because you can't. Buy every record. First, because you wouldn't like to. Number two, you wouldn't have time to. You know how much stuff is out there? Increase your sensitivity to what you are already exposed to. What does that mean? It means when you sit down in a Pizza Hut, for instance, and somebody is playing a song from a jukebox, you, out of every person in the room, other than the person who put the coin in the slot, ought to be aware of what is playing on that thing. You see that? In other words, the Christian, remember we said what holy was? Two parts. One had to do with the moral character, if you like, love, and the other had to do with wisdom. That means the Christian, a holy man or a holy woman, is the most sensitive, discerning, perceptive person in a room. It means when you sit down, your waiter or your waitress, you're aware of where they are. You're aware of every person who is sitting in the tables around you. You're aware when you're talking of what they think and what they feel. You're aware of that. You ever seen Christians in a room? I had a waitress, a Christian waitress, said, you need to write a tract to Christians on how to witness to waitresses. Because Christians are the worst people in all of the restaurants. Actually, waitresses would fight with each other not to take the Christians. Because you know what they do? They just talk all the time. They treat the person like a piece of meat. Give me a hamburger. See? And talking, and then they give them a tract. They get five cups of free coffee, and when they leave a tract, 4 things God wants you to know, and no tip. The Playboy penthouse crowd comes in, talks to the people, treat them like human beings, learn their names, has some fun with them, leaves them a large tip. See? What's the difference? What do you think Jesus would be like in a restaurant? See? You've got to be aware. If you're going to watch TV and you haven't shot it, like some people I know, I had a friend that said, you're going to shoot your TV? He said, no, I don't believe in guns. But if you're going to watch TV, you can't just watch it. You understand? You can't just watch it. People just watch it. Their brains turn into strawberry jello. They just watch that thing. See, you can't just watch it. You've got to watch it with a reason. The Bible says, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. If you can't do to the glory of God, don't do it at all. That means when you see a commercial or something, you've got to think. You can't just go, commercial. My favorite one is this. Remember the Madge commercial? See? What can I do with these dishpan hands, Madge? See? She's having a manicure. Any woman that can afford a manicure can afford a dishwashing machine. She's having a manicure, right? Why don't you use green gunk liquid, says Madge. Is it safe? You're soaking in it. Ah, she said, pulling out her hands from green gunk dishwashing liquid. And then the big crunch of the commercial. Softens your hands while you do the dishes. You poor sucker that rushed down to get green gunk dishwashing liquid. You think what it means is if you put it in the dishwashing liquid that all day afterwards your hands remain soft. That's not what the commercial said. It said, softens your hands while you do the dishes, which means as long as you keep your fingers in green gunk, it will stay soft, which is what happens when you put it in water. So I watch commercials sometimes with rolled up socks. You know? And I throw things at the screen. You ever seen this? Part of a nutritious breakfast. The plate is part of a nutritious. I guess a sock, right? Women wear furs without knowing what they are. What would you think of a fur called Alaskan sable? It is dyed skunk. That's what it is. Australian seal is actually dyed rabbit. Blue Japanese wolf is dyed goat. Black Pyro fox is dyed dog. And Russian black marten is dyed possum. There's nothing like it. And I say, good thing, too. Our brand gives a whiter wash. Then what? Eh? Another sock. Isn't quality the most important thing in an aspirin? No! That it takes your headache away. That's the most important thing. So, what are we doing here? We are getting any exposure you have must be constantly filtered and checked. You've got to start thinking like two things. Think like a prophet, think like an evangelist. Prophet keeps looking and saying, what in the fat is this dumb thing saying? This is what God says, what a total jerk thing this is. Okay? Second, you think like an evangelist. You ask yourself this question, what need is here that is not being met, that this is attempting to meet? Let's take the second most popular movie it's actually, I think it's moved to one now. Actually, Star Wars has just been displaced because of the videos. E.T., number one movie of all time. Star Wars, I think, moved second because they've sold more videos now of E.T. than any other video in history. Okay, and they only sold it for a few days. Advertised for 6 months before. Why is E.T. so popular? I mean, here is a little demon-possessed turtle. Why? I mean, seriously. Let's see if I can find a picture of this little character here. It's my rogues gallery of things. Let's see what I got in here. Let's see. Only 47 more folders to go. Let's see, is it in there? No, it's not in there. Okay. No. Let's see. Oh, I know, it's got to be here somewhere. Oh, yeah, here he is. I mean, not even a mother could love a face like that. Why is he so popular? Why is this little weird little being so popular? Well, there are over 32 parallels to this little dude in Jesus' life. This is a little Christ for the 1980s. Eh? I mean, it's a strange-looking creature. But for instance, when E.T. first came out, interview with Spielberg, E.T. is not just a movie, it's a sacred object, a kind of household god for suburbia and for Hollywood. His mother in the movie is called Mary. No dad. See? He's, who knows how old, millions of years maybe. He loves people and heals. Touch, even the ads. See the ads? With the finger. E.T. and Elliot's finger touching. The Adam and God, Michelangelo from the Sistine Chapel. And of course he dies after, and when he dies they give you military time. It's about 3-something in the afternoon, which is around the time they think Jesus died. And then he rises from the dead and he will return. The Return. See? Now you can look at E.T. two ways. You can go, this, oh, isn't so demonic, man, these people like into these little, look at this, man. I mean, you can just see the demons, man. Look at that. I mean, look at demon stuff, man. You just see little kids lugging one of these things. And if you saw him in the dark night, you get a fright, just like Elliot did. Ah! In the garage, see? That's looking like a prophet. See, prophet knows what is deviation from biblical norm. But you've got to also look at it like an evangelist and say, why are kids all over the world adopted E.T.? Because there is a hunger in their lives for somebody that E.T. has become a substitute for. That means you look with two sets of eyes at everything. Not only prophetically at the wrong, but also at the unmet need. Now, here's a wonderful thing. If you need to do this, you need to make a block of time every week in your schedule. Do you ever go to the mall or anything? You ever do that? Then you need to take a little block of time, 10, 15 minutes even. Go to the record store. Go talk to the guy with the liver hanging out of his ear and the radiation hairstyle. Ask him what is hot and what is not. Don't go, I'm coming in here to check on the demonic records you have. I know you got a lot of demonic records, and I just want to know what those demonic records are, all right? Okay, this is called the prophet, but not the wise one. Find out. Flick through, see? You come with all kinds of interesting stuff. Look at the lyrics if you can without wrecking the packaging. Go to a magazine rack. Pick up a couple of, get a Circus or a Rolling Stone or a Spin or something and just flick through. Have a look. Is anything interesting? Buy the magazine. Or if you're so cheap and you don't want us to put this demonic record on your screen, then memorize the entire page. Okay? You will find more illustrations and real stuff coming to you. And then what you say will be yours, be real, and part of your life. You've got to build it in, though. Why are you doing this? Because any intelligent missionary works with their mission field. The only difference, I said, between this mission field and any other one is this one changes every week. And if you're not up with it, you'll pay a simple price. One day, nobody will listen. You'll be saying the same powerful things you've always said, but your audience will have moved and you did not. And you can say goodbye to that group. And that's why I see many people who are very effective with an audience. They never shifted. They never changed. They stayed the same way. Their audience moved on, and now they can address people who are like them. Christians talking to Christians instead of unsaved people. Last one, and with this we quit. Because lunch is calling. Colonel Sanders is singing. This is the hard one. But you need to do it. You need to find out what's going on in the heads of the people who define that culture. You want to find out about George Lucas, find out about his movies, then read some of the stuff on George Lucas' thing. I get magazines. Some of them, people send them to me. Sometimes I find them. I get all kinds of fun stuff. See, I get these kind of things. I have friends that are Trekkies and fan clubs, and they send me new issues of things. I keep my eye in Christian magazines occasionally. This is edited by Greg Lewis, the same guy who did that book there we talked about. Every now and then you'll get a good article and stuff. What are we saying here? It's called read. We've looked at all this. Here's how you develop this one. Read. John Wesley would not let you be a Methodist preacher unless you spent at least read 3 new books every week. Besides your Bible study, 3 new books. You could not be a Methodist preacher. He didn't want a bunch of ignorant people going out representing Jesus. Now I'm going to ask you a question. It's an embarrassing one. How much do you read? You must become a good reader. Some of you don't like reading. It's fine. I understand. You come from an MTV generation. That's understandable. Learn to read. Become a voracious reader. You read everything. The Wheaties packet. Read the salt. Read everything. Because you need also to have something to say when you've got your audience. And when you're on the road and you're in ministry, not too many people are going to be able to minister to you. Who ministers to the ministers when they're traveling? you're going to have to learn to feed your own soul. And that means not only read in order to find out what your audience is like, but read and constantly take that reading back to God and ask Him, what does your word say about this? How, as a Christian, can I speak to that thing? I can add one other thing that's also hard. Write. Why write? Write letters. Write diaries. Write little notes. Write poems. Write songs. Write something. Write every day. I do not have a secretary. That's two reasons for that. One, no secretary in a right mind would try and hang around a person like me for any length of time. Number two, I want to be in contact with the audience that writes. So when they write, it comes to me. When I get that letter, I'm reading something from a kid who has been in a meeting and has spent enough time and is concerned enough to put it in print. That means it's worth my time to write back. Okay, time is about flown. Keep those three things. Take the time, spend time with people, get out there, do some study, and then finally get a little bit of digging behind.